94.3 The Dude is very grateful to our men and women in uniform. We're proud to recognize local members of our military by turning the spotlight on them right now in our Soldier Salute.
I'm your host, Sergeant First Class Retired Don Sorensen, and on today's Soldier Salute, I'm speaking with United States Army Command Sergeant Major, retired Jim Wertman. Jim, tell me about yourself.
Well, I entered the Army from Connecticut in 1963. I went to basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey. I went to AIT at Fort Stewart, Georgia, as a 716, which was an administrative specialist. And about a year after doing that, I realized that the people who were making all the rank were the people that were in the infantry. So about a year after I was in, I transferred into the infantry. I did 2 tours in Vietnam and with the 25th Infantry Division in 1967, deployed from Schofield Barracks on the USS troop ship General Walker. I was in a recon platoon. Spent about 11 months there. Got wounded and got sent back. Went back the second time as a Staff Sergeant E6 to the 4th Infantry Division, who B Troop 1st of the 10th Cav. And when I was with B Troop 1st of the 10th Cav, I was a platoon sergeant and a platoon leader, and spent another tour in Vietnam and returned from that tour from Vietnam, and then went to drill sergeant school. In drill sergeant school, I got stationed down in Fort Jackson in 1969 after my second tour in Vietnam, and met a young lady here from South Carolina who we ended up getting married, and spent the remainder of the time with me in the military service.
Jim, it sounds like you did some really cool things while you were in the Army. You actually had a couple of things that you helped get started here in South Carolina, didn't you?
Of my 30 years in the military, I also had a very prestigious assignment of teaching at the Citadel Military College in 1978 to 1980, and then it helped open the University of South Carolina Army ROTC in 1980 to 1982. Went back to Hawaii, went back to Germany, and was a Command Sergeant Major in 4-7 Infantry, and was part of Task Force 7 Infantry in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. From there, my final assignment was at the Sergeant Major's Academy at Fort Bliss, Texas, where I was the commander of the Sergeant Major's Academy, in charge of the Command Sergeant Major's Residence Course, Non-Residence Course, the Command Sergeant Major's Course, and the Command Sergeant Major's Spouse Course. Probably one of the best jobs that I had in the military, and that I was able to help groom Sergeant Majors for the Army of the future. I retired in December of 1993 and returned to South Carolina with my bride, and got into the motorcycle industry in 1994. And from 1994 until this very day, I've been in the motorcycle industry.
Jim, it seems like if there is an event in South Carolina that involves veterans and motorcycles, you're a part of that. Tell me about Carolina Honda and how you guys became so involved with veteran events.
In the year 2000, as a member of Carolina Honda, I initiated and started a ride called the Vets Christmas Charity Ride. Me and a good friend by the name of Jim Royer from All American Heating and Air. Our first ride consisted of 100 bikes, where we took Christmas to the veterans at Dorn VA Medical Center. That ride is always on the 2nd of December, this year December 9th, which will be the 18th anniversary of the ride. Since we've started the ride, our largest ride was in 2015 with 6,440 motorcycles. We now average around 3,500 to 4,000 a year. In 2017, we surpassed $1 million in gifts and money to Dorn VA Medical Center, and we're extremely proud of the ride and what it represents. It is the bike community, which about 75% of bike riders today are military veterans, but it's also the South Carolina community. We also ask school children to make a Christmas card for a veteran. And what we do at Dorn VA Medical Center is every meal that's served during the week of Christmas and New Year's, they have a card on their tray from a child or from a church. And if you've ever been in the military and you want to see a grown veteran cry, this is probably the event that would make them do that. A lot of people ask me, why did you start the Vets Christmas Charity Ride? For all those who have served our country, one of the loneliest times a year is Christmas. Of my my 30 years, I doubt I was home half of those Christmases. And I want you to think of the people that are in the VA hospital, different age groups from different wars. Many have no family at all, or if they do have family, it's not here in South Carolina, so they have no Christmas. And our goal is to bring a little bit of Christmas cheer. This also helps the soldiers that are going through all of this hardship that may be homeless, because Dorn VA has some homeless shelters and the Christmas is provided there. And for a lot of times, this is a really big deal into helping this veteran get ready to come back into society, to realize that somebody cares about them and cares about their military service to our country means a great deal.
Jim, you may have hung up the uniform, but you never stopped taking care of soldiers, did you?
Someone told me the other day, well, you never really got out. You're still connected. And the answer to that is true. I really loved the military, and I had a very hard time leaving the military after 30 years. In fact, the max you could spend was 30 years and 19 days, and that's what I did. But I try to stay very connected to the military, and I use Carolina Honda, the business, to be able to do things for the military, like providing free motorcycles for motorcycle safety training so the soldiers don't have to pay for the ride to learn how to ride a motorcycle. Also involved in the Troop Appreciation Fishing Tournament, which is the Wounded Warrior Fishing Tournament here in South Carolina every June, where we bring wounded warriors from across the state of South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia to Lake Murray and take them out on a fishing expedition for a half a day. It's a tremendous event. I also work with the Big Red Barn Retreat, which is an organization that provides a lot of training for our veterans who come home, a lot of medical training, PTSD, all kinds of things. So I stay very, very actively involved in the military and in military events. And that's kind of one of the reasons that I became the owner of Carolina Honda, because that gave me the money and the resources to be able to continue to work with the military community.
Jim, you deployed to Vietnam in the infantry, and then you came back and you were able to serve as a drill instructor on Fort Jackson. That experience has to have been so important to the guys that have come after you that have served in combat.
Well, one of the things that was extremely pleasing was being able to be a drill sergeant, being able to work with young people and teach them the values of our military, to teach them the ethics of our military, to teach them why we serve and when we serve. But the other issue was, it was great to have the Vietnam experience to be able to explain to them that we train for war, and sometimes we actually really go to war. And people that are successful in fighting a war are successful in training. And it's how you train, because how you train is how you're going to fight. And being able to instill that in young people and making them realize that this training that they had may someday actually come to the point where it was real, and that they had to do these things, and learning military discipline, learning military first aid, learning how to shoot a weapon, learning how to throw a hand grenade, all the things that were taught in basic training, undergoing the infiltration course where you actually went under live fire to get a feel for what it was like, is extremely important for these kids. And the thing about it is if we look out through our military history, there's a lot of times people were not in the infantry but found themselves in a situation in a war zone where they were actually fighting the enemy. And today's fluid battlefield is even more important than it was back then. Today, everybody who's in the country is involved in the war in some shape or form. So I think being a drill sergeant, being able to pass that on, and then one of the nicest rewards from that is when you go after you're retired, having people that you'll meet at Fort Jackson or other military bases that remember you as a drill sergeant, and they'll come up to you and speak to you and say, "Do you remember me? You were my drill sergeant." A lot of times you don't, but you listen and they remember you. They remember the experience. And if we can instill that amount of pride and discipline in these kids, they go a long way.
Jim, the upcoming year has been declared Year of the Vietnam Veteran. As a Vietnam veteran, what does that mean to you?
It means a lot, because this was the forgotten war. World War I, World War II, Korea, Desert Shield, Desert Storm. When our soldiers came back, they were welcomed home with parades. They were welcomed home with open arms, with bands and ceremonies. When you talk about Vietnam in that era, that's a completely different era, and we didn't come home that way. I can remember my second tour in Vietnam when I came home in 1969, landing in California and being issued civilian clothes and not understanding, well, why can't we wear our uniform to come the rest of the way home? And the reason we couldn't wear our uniform is because people were protesting, veterans were getting spit on, veterans were getting yelled at. And just imagine, after seeing your buddies die over there, after fighting over there, fighting a war we never asked to fight in because a soldier just follows orders, coming home to that type of reception. And that has been a cloud over every Vietnam veteran's head ever since they've returned. And the year of the Vietnam veteran, actually having people come out and say, thank you, you served honorably, you did what you were supposed to do, means a whole lot. We still have a lot of people struggling from Vietnam that have not been able to come to terms with what they've seen. You know, now you hear all about this PTSD. Well, the people in Vietnam saw the same stuff. I can tell you to this day who the first person died in my platoon was. His name was Welsh. And when I go to the Vietnam Wall, I always look up his name. But we suffered the same things. The thing is, there was never any help there. There was nothing. And that's really, really hard to digest. Some of us still deal with it today. I think it's important that we have this event. I think it's important that South Carolina recognizes the Vietnam vets, because that's another issue. We left people behind. What we never did do as an American people is welcome the Vietnam soldier back into the community, and it's well overdue.
Jim, you support a lot of great causes, especially where veterans are concerned, but one of your primary focuses is the South Carolina Military Museum. Tell me about that.
I'm very proud of the South Carolina Military Museum, and I'm on the board there because that preserves our military heritage. And my goal in the next few years is just to try to get veterans to adopt this museum, because this is what preserves the heritage of the military. And I was taught by the military people when I went in that we always remember those who served before us. And I think that's an example that we have to continue to pass on to young people today. Very proud to be in South Carolina because South Carolina really takes care of veterans. And very, very proud of what we've been able to accomplish with the Vets Christmas Charity Ride, the Troop Appreciation Fishing Tournament, the Big Red Barn, and the South Carolina Military Museum, and anything else. If it's military, you're probably going to find me there. So thank you.
Thanks for joining us in our Soldier Salute, presented by Little Pigs Barbecue. Serving Columbia since 1963 with that bodacious buffet. By Lexington Guns and Shooting Range. Veteran owned and operated. By Carolina Honda Powerhouse. Motorcycles, ATVs, and side-by-sides with discounts for all military personnel. And Dominion Energy. We depend on